Today we're talking about the Moka Pot of the future. Now, many would argue we shouldn't mess with the Moka Pot. It's cheap, it's ubiquitous, people like the coffee it makes, but it isn't perfect. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just, well, it's a little bit difficult when it comes to things like specialty coffees, more interesting, more complex coffees, if you don't want that very traditional Italian experience from your mocha. And we spent quite a long time on a technique. We built a Franken mocha. We did a ton of experimentation to get to our ultimate technique that turns out to be the most viewed video we've ever made on this channel. The thing about our technique, if you look at it, well, what we're trying to do is maintain the temperature in the bottom of the brewer, so it's not too hot and it doesn't go too cold. You get a nice slow, steady stream. Temperature doesn't get too high. You don't get those harsh kind of bitter flavors. You get a tasty brew. The problem is, we don't really have any information. We've got the flow of coffee coming out the top, but that's about it. Now, someone smart and enterprising looked at what we were doing and thought, quite rightly, there's a better way to do that. And so they built something I think is very cool. Let me show it to you. This is the MokaBot. Excellent pun, good work. This is not a product you can buy. This is not commercially available anywhere. There's maybe one or two of these. These are kind of built by somebody as a prototype, as a kind of proof of concept. I have no affiliation to it. I was given this. I don't usually let people give me things. I work quite hard to stop people giving me things, but in rare instances, I am outsmarted. And so well done to Javi, the creator of this, who managed to convince me to take this away with me, receive it, to play with it. He didn't ask me to make this video, but I just think it's worth showing you this thing because it's cool and it makes me excited for the future of the Moka Pot. Let's turn it on. Oh, look at this little display. It is a touchscreen display in here. We've got 3 buttons at the bottom: off, preheat, extract. You've got a pressure reading. So you know the pressure, the temperature in here. It's not very warm, but that's okay. We're surviving. Now, for each of these things, we can control the temperature. You'll also see at the top it says disconnected. We'll get to that in a bit, but you can connect this to Wi-Fi and you can kind of log and watch a brew through a web app, which I think is kind of cool. If I turn this around, you can see there's a little green light and a little red light. The red light will go on when the element is heating, and the green light goes on to show that it's on. If we open up, obviously this is like an electric kettle base, and inside this thing, actually when we first opened this thing, Javi had put in a little fish. There's a tiny fish. And it took me a minute to work out the Lynchian reference there. If you don't get that reference, someone will have commented it down in the comments, so you can check there. Anyway, if we look inside here, you can see down in the bottom, there's a little temperature probe, which can pass the data back through to the kettle base, so it knows how hot the water is in here. That's very exciting. So other than that, it's a very conventional Moka Pot. You see, the magic of this basically is that in this controller, you have effectively a PID controller. That means that it's able to take the information of how hot things are, how hot it's getting, and judiciously turn on the element to kind of hit the desired temperature. You see PIDs used all the time in coffee equipment. I should probably explain PIDs more fully, more entertainingly. Yes, let me just explain for just a second how PIDs work. I'm on a boat. Let me tell you about a PID controllers. I've seen things you wouldn't believe. Now, the PID goes back over 100 years, they say. Russian-American man, name of Minorsky. And he took his inspiration from those gods who walk amongst you mere mortals. He was inspired by the helmsman of ships. All right, that's enough of that. If you want more of that, you'll find it on Patreon. Let's get into some of the science of this whole stuff. I'll try and keep it simple, but not so simple. Some of you get mad with me down in those comments below. In this example, a controller is used where you've got a system where you're trying to maintain some aspect of it, right? That's called your set point. And your controller is going to be using one particular process to achieve that set point. Now, that might be the rudder on a ship. That might be, let's say, the heating element inside a coffee machine. Now, in our example, our good ship here, we're going to set to a course of 106 degrees Celsius. To the island of delicious coffee brewing. That's where we're going. Now let's say our ship has drifted off course. The question isn't just which way do you turn the rudder, but more how much should you adjust the rudder by so that you don't overshoot and end up off course in a different direction. Every system is unique, and so you need to tune a PID controller to each particular system. And you do that using 3 different numbers that you feed into the controller. And each one of those numbers correlates to a letter in the name of the controller. First up, the P for proportional. The proportional number tells the system how it should act depending on how far away it is from the desired set point. Obviously, if you're miles off course, you want to make a big correction, but if you're a little bit off course, you don't want to make a massive overcorrection because then you'll miss and go the wrong way. Second up, the integral. Now, this is easier to explain perhaps in the system of a ship. If there's a crosswind blowing the whole time, constantly just pushing me off course a little bit, I can sort of correct for that in the system. In a coffee machine, a little bit different. I guess if a machine was in a very cold room compared to a very hot room, you might need a different number here because the system would have this kind of constant integral loss of heat that was different between the hot and the cold room. D, the derivative. Now, people describe this as kind of looking back at the past errors to understand what is an appropriate adjustment to make. It should theoretically help a system reduce overcompensation and kind of missing. It should basically stop it oscillating too much around the set point. Those are the 3 numbers that you need to program into a PID to help it hit whatever you want and stay there. Look, most of us are never going to need to program a PID, but we talk about them all the time, so we should have at least a little bit of understanding of what's going on under there. And now we know. And knowing is half the battle. All right, you salty sea dogs, let's brew some coffee. So first thing we're going to do is put some water in this to preheat it, so I can show you how the preheat works. Because if you've watched the Moka Pot technique, you would know that we like to start with hot water in here. Generally, things taste better. So we're going to get some water in here and we'll use the preheat function to get it close to boiling before we add our coffee and start our brew. Up to just below the pressure valve. All right, so if we pop this on here, we can see our temperature is 17.2 degrees Celsius. We can go to preheat and it's off. And if I show you this, you'll see the little red light. It's very excited. So this is going to heat it up to 91 Celsius. We have calibrated this. You can do a little calibration function at boiling point. And so you can kind of do that wherever you are in the world. So if you wanted to have a matching brew, I suppose, at sea level and at, say, 1,800 meters above sea level, you could use the calibration to get a little bit closer, which I think is kind of clever. Anyway, while this heats up, I should grind some coffee. Teaspoon. Hello there. Get a little suitably, well, possibly suitably ground coffee in here. All right, we're getting there. 75. Through the magic of editing, we are up to temperature. So I will insert some coffee, and then we're going to decide our extraction temperature. I'm feeling 108 degrees Celsius. Let's go 107. I feel like 107. Let's open the lid and have a little look. So you'll see, if I show you a little red light, it'll be blinking aggressively as it heats up. But as we get closer to our ideal temperature, well, I say ideal, target temperature, you'll see the pulsing change as it begins to apply heat differently, because in this one aspect, a computer with an element is far better than a human and a stovetop of some sort, be it electric, gas, induction, or otherwise. Okay, now we're starting to get close. Oh, here we go. Look at that. Nice, steady, slow flow. Nice. Holding around 107. I'm going to take you off in a second. And let our residual pressure. So you can see the temperature starting to rise a little bit quickly there. As we ran out of liquid in the lower chamber, any heat is going to have a much bigger impact. And so at that point, I'm going to remove this and allow the remaining sort of pressure to dissipate. But it becomes a much more controlled, predictable, probably more delicious experience. How easy was that? Look at this. No gurgles, no hisses, just a gentle proceeding through the brew, and thusly, we've made coffee. We've got 70 grams of yield, maybe a little bit low, but not bad, not bad. We'll check the old extraction of this. Okay, that's pretty extracted by the look of things. Moka pots often have the mocha smell. This doesn't really have it, which is interesting. Obviously, we've been brewing at high temperatures, but not as high as they often will get. Hey, not perfect. A little bit harsh in the finish. I think I might actually want to dial that down a little bit. I might go on this next brew a little lower in both temperature and slightly coarser on the grind setting. This cup it's quite sweet. It's got nice texture. It's a decent strength to it, which is not surprising. Nice clarity of flavor. Acidity is balanced, but it's just a little harsh and a little aggressive, a little bit of bite to it that says we could just back off the extraction a little bit and that would be okay. So we'll do what we should never do. We're going to change two variables at once. That's always the sensible thing, isn't it? Let's change temperature and therefore pressure, reduce that slightly coarser. You know, if you're watching this and you're trying to pick apart the numbers on the screen and be like, oh, did it do exactly what it was supposed to do in terms of PID controlling? Well, look, for me, more than anything else, this is a proof of concept. And I think the concept is proven. All right, so we're ready. I have started a little screen record on my laptop of the MokaBot kind of web app view. So you connect this to a Wi-Fi network and then things can talk to each other because computers. We're in preheat, which is good. You can see the temperature coming up here and also on the screen. There is a pressure reading. I'm going to presume that is calculated rather than measured because I don't see any sort of pressure sensor here. And I guess if you math appropriately, then you can just work out pressure based on temperature. I'm going to put our coffee in a second. The thing about this that is the most compelling to me is that I can make an intentional change to my brew and it will be delivered to me by the little computer. Right? In most brewers, you can make intentional changes to things like water temperature. Or if you're pouring a V60, you can change contact time or pause of those things. Doing this on a Moka Pot was never an option. And what's involves some code, involves a little bit of hardware, but you know, this is not fringe technology in a weird sort of way, right? Like this is very available. This could be, you know, put together, and someone has put it together themselves. So a manufacturer, I hope, will take something, you know, from him rather than just stealing it or copying it or trying to do anything like that. But like, I hope this kind of tech ends up in proper Moka Pots, because how joyful is this as an experience just to make a simple change? And we'll see how it impacts the taste. Being a man full of patience, I might just proceed into extraction. Extract 106. Let's have a little look in the top. All right, you can see on the chart here when I faffed about, I disconnected it temporarily and it showed sort of nothing. All right, the brew proceeded very much as I would have expected. I took it off when I saw that little ramp in temperature and it just tried like one little sputtery bubble right at the end. So we definitely cut it early enough. Oh, I'm making a mess today. Okay, from the coarser grind, we've got a bit more juiciness in there. In some ways, I would want it a little bit more concentrated again. And so for me, this has a really nice texture. It's not harsh or bitter. It's got some nice acidity. I mean, look, as Moka Pot brews go, I can taste how good the coffee we put in is quite clearly. There is complexity, there is sweetness. That is a tasty and interesting cup of coffee. In a funny sort of way, I could imagine this becoming two different products. I could imagine just a kind of PID controlled, but you don't know kind of Moka Pot, an electric Moka Pot where you just push go and it doesn't run the way that others have, which is just go full bore, very aggressive, click off at some point, and then away you go. Instead, there is the judicious, careful, thoughtful, for want of a better term, application of heat to keep you at a nice little temperature. You pre-program the temperature, manufacturer says 105, 106, whatever it is, and away you go. You'd need some sort of auto cutout, which we'll get to in a second, but as an experience, just hit go, have a nice mocha. That seems quite desirable. And then a kind of pro version, which is something like this, where you can mess around with stuff. And again, this is, look, I can't make this, I should be clear. Before I describe this as relatively simple, I can't make this. I don't know how to do that. So, you know, I shouldn't say simple, but you know, what it's asking it to do is relatively simple. To build in something like a declining temperature profile, let's say, or just a switch that, you know, once the heat begins to ramp up, once the sort of temperature behaves unexpectedly because the mass of water in the bottom has changed, at that point, kill the heat. And you, assuming that your temperature is X, you know that there'll be this much dissipated pressure, and you know it'll finish at about the right kind of thing. Because that's the last piece of the puzzle to solve. Like when it shuts off, that's it. That's the thing to work out how to do effectively to end up with one, a consistent amount of liquid as a finished kind of yield. And then two, that's really going to decide a lot about the flavor because you don't want it to run into those higher temperatures and pressures because that will add a little bit more bitterness. You want it to kind of ease off at the end of anything, a kind of ramp down, like your kind of classic espresso declining pressure profile might be exactly what you want in a Moka Pot too. But the idea with this is exciting because we can just work it out. Let's maybe wrap up with one more brew, because I feel like I haven't totally nailed this. I'm going to take it to 106 and then reduce the temperature as we brew and see if we can just ease it down to a gentle finish, aiming for, let's say, 70-ish grams out from 12 grams of coffee. Let's brew. All right, let's go to extract. I'm going to keep an eye on things. Here comes coffee. Okay, we're up to 102, 103. All right, I'm going to say, let's take it down to 102 here. Now that's going to kill the heating element, as we see. This is going very well, even though it's not really dropping. Okay, it's dropping now, but I would say we're probably at the end of the brew. Now we never got the declining temperature, not hugely surprising. Well, no, a little surprising that the element, it retains enough heat that, you know, the evaporation wasn't really causing much cooling, even though you could see it wasn't adding more heat into the system. That's, again, something you could just write software for, to adapt to. Anyway, look, let's just get this tested, tasted, and wrap it up. $72 grams. And I would hope for a 3.5%. Complex, full, touch bitterness, but minimal. I'm not going to say that's the best Moka Pot brew of my life, but it makes me wonder how many I've had that have been better, which is pretty cool. That was not a lot of work. This was something smarter, more capable than me doing a job that I've tried to do through technique and doing it very well. We often talk about innovation in coffee, and there's rarely much innovation, but actually here you have an iconic brewer, massively popular, and someone's done something that I think genuinely moves it forward, makes it a better brewer, makes it actually more accessible to more people, and I hope somebody works with Javi to turn this into a thing that people can buy. I have nothing to do with this financially. I want nothing to do with this financially. I don't think it would need to be wildly expensive to do. You know what I mean? The parts, the development, I don't think requires this to be a super premium product. But now, I want to hear from you down in those comments below. What are your thoughts seeing this? Would you want a smarter Moka Pot? Would you want something like a Moka Pot? What is it that this doesn't yet do that it could that would be interesting? I know a lot of people are loath to have another thing that connects to your phone or has a touch screen, but I think you could build something simple. But I'm just genuinely interested. Am I alone in being excited about something like this? It's just fun to see people innovate, and I'm grateful to Javi for forcing this upon me, even though he refused to let me pay for it, which I really would have rather done. Anyway, this is fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.